Greetings and welcome to the Soror the Mage experiment. I'll start with a few minutes of Kaosillator just to get us in the mood, and then I will give a learned and advanced lecture on entheogens, spirits, Goetia, secrets of the magical grimoires, etc.
Welcome, Baz, Philip, Charlotte, and Amanda Pomander. Long time no see, Miss Pomander. So greetings, everyone. So glad you could make it. I'm quite looking forward to this one because I've actually I've written notes and everything. Can you hear my voice okay? I always ask and you always can. So today I'm going to follow on from what I started talking about. I think I've done this is maybe the third live stream I've done on the subject of are spirits real? What's going on with the old grimoires? I'm definitely going to talk about my psilocybin experiences because let's face it, what else have I got to talk about? So I'm actually, like I always said that my live streams were disappointing because I don't keep notes, and if I do notes, I tend not to read from them. So I'm going to start reading notes. So excuse me if I don't look to camera. It's not about looking at camera. It's about the quality of the material that I'm putting out here. So I think I did tell you last time that I'd had a bit of a rethink about my magical direction. For so long, I have implicitly believed that magic was pretty much a psychological process, an extremely powerful psychological process in the mold of Robert Anton Wilson, Christopher Hyatt, Israel Regardie, and all this old grimoire stuff and the traditional magic stuff was old, antiquated, outdated, superstitious, without any base in reality, that people that believed they were working with spirits were possibly mentally ill, possibly deluded, although how does that fit with my experiences on psilocybin? And, that's what basically got me into magic in the first place. In fact, it kind of kickstarted my whole intellectual, spiritual, magical life. Was a very profound experience I had on good old magic mushrooms that grow abundantly and locally, although not anymore because I think they spray fungicides. But there are still spots that you can get them, and if not, you can get them off the internet. You can get grow kits, and I, not without reservation, but do your research, make special attention to set and setting, and make sure you frame it in a beautiful spiritual way. And I can almost guarantee you'll have a cathartic spiritual experience. So I'm going to try and, you guys, as you do, speak amongst yourselves, and then I'll come to live chat at the end. If I start and try and speak to you guys now, it'll totally, because
I find it very difficult to concentrate at the best of times. So until this new beginning, I'm always having new beginnings in magic, but that's what it's all about. I was very fogged up. I think my problem is I over-intellectualize everything and have to think and intellectually understand something before I kind of run with it. And it kind of sucks the heart out of a lot of magical practice. My skepticism is impediment to my spiritual growth sometimes. It's all, hey, Lisa F., how are you? The skull is never far away, Lisa. So I've had to have a bit of a rethink, because when I was doing the Lost Word podcast, which is sadly now lost because some fucker deleted it, not mentioning any names, I was totally not doing any physical magic. I wasn't doing my Golden Dawn rituals. I was basically jumping onto topics not always put forth by myself and studying, and I just felt like I wasn't understanding anything. I wasn't getting it. I was losing that beautiful magical connection that I once had. But now that that's over, and perhaps it's for the best, I've withdrawn into myself. I had to kind of withdraw from all social media for a little while. I'm not a great extrovert at the best of times. And, it's like I need to pull back this energy. I've been living with Soror Star in her beautiful house with her wonderful family. And it's been an absolute tonic for me. I feel physically, spiritually, and emotionally regenerated. So I've started the Practicus Golden Dawn rituals again. And also, I stick doggedly to this idea that, spirits are psychological, but there's a whole, I don't know if it's just because I'm now looking in those places, but the idea of spirit contact and magicians working with spirits, it's absolutely all over the place. And I do have reservations, but I thought, okay, let's give it a shot. So I have done a couple of evocations lately as opposed to invocations, but let's go back to where we stopped off the last time and have a look at Aaron Leach's excellent book, The Secrets of the Magical Grimoires, because I think there's a lot to unpack there. So one major turnoff for me about the Grimoires was they were very wrapped up in Christian methodology, Christian ideas, prayers. It all mentions God and Jesus and all that. And as you know, I did try to, Philip Blair, it is a healing experience, even though it drags you to hell. They are going to wear off eventually, and you'll be left a better and more complete person, I think. So I would go for that. I'll maybe give some advice on that. The one thing I feel I am somewhat expert in is psilocybin. Specifically psilocybin. I've only smoked DMT once, and it was not enough. It was just, I kind of saw a few geometric shapes and a kind of weird, it is definitely a strange experience, but I didn't have the breakthrough. But psilocybin, man, I've had many, many breakthroughs. So I think I probably went over chapter 1 last week. I can't remember. But chapters 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 are basically giving like a historical grounding to the magical grimoires, mainly the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Lemegeton, the Abramelin, the Book of Abramelin the Mage, the Arbitel, which is the book that I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Arbitel as well, and its special relevance to me. Many of those medieval, who knows where these grimoires started, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get at today. So Aaron Leach describes similarities between the grimoires, ancient shamanism like Stone Age shamanism, and the African spirit cults or traditional religions. Shamans wear special garments, as do magicians, and interface with the spirit world while having a special relationship with a few. So you've got your familiar spirits, and they kind of intermediate and negotiate for you on behalf of the larger spirit world. And I was thinking, could not my very personal, which if you're looking at the psychological model, these beings that I encountered in these massive trips that I had, which were massive, could not my mantid being, my lion beings, they are spirits. They absolutely are spirits. So the Secrets of the Magical Grimoires moves from describing kind of Stone Age, what we'd know as tribal shamanism, where one member of the tribe, because of some mental peculiarity, perhaps, I think we'd perhaps call it now schizophrenia, bipolar. I don't know if that film. Oh, what's that? Oh, it's my alarm going off for the last Venus ritual I worked. So yeah, shamans were basically selected by the gods or the spirits as being unusual. Hey, Robin, Jonocide, for having something that marked them out for the rest of the tribe. They probably wouldn't make a tremendously great hunter or warrior, so they had experiences which would lend them to this kind of spiritual work. So it led me to believe our shamans born. I noticed a lot of, I think Aaron Leach did as well. It's unclear from my notes which bits are Aaron Leach and which bits are me. But the way I write notes, it tends to be mostly jumping from his ideas and putting in some of my own. So I noticed straight away that the descriptions of shamanic trips being taken up into celestial or infernal, heavenly realms or hellish realms, very much matches the psilocybin, or should I call them entheogens? Entheogens means they allow you to meet God, basically. And I think they totally do. And looking back, I'll go into this further, but there's pretty firm evidence in my mind that all the biblical prophets have some link to either acacia, which is DMT containing wood, or basically I think all religion is founded on the psychedelic experience. And this is by far, hey Maggie, far from a new idea, but it's really being much more seriously considered in academia nowadays. I read a very interesting paper by a guy called Benny something or other. Benny Shannon proposes manna was an entheogen. Manna, when the Israelites were wandering 40 days or 40 years or whatever in the desert, they found this manna stuff, which seems pretty much mushrooms to me, or some kind of entheogen. Think William James, Aldous Huxley, and Terence McKenna. So this guy, Benny Shannon, is an Israeli academic. He wrote The Antipodes of the Mind in 2002, and he totally sees Moses as psychonaut. That's obviously my word. Now, his experiences, he is affluent for you. Yeah, good. I always get a good crowd. I mean, a nice crowd. I don't often get like hundreds of people in my chat, but who wants a big party full of nobodies when you can have a small, intimate gathering full of very much somebodies? So the guy, Benny Shannon, admits that he's had many very meaningful ayahuasca experiences. And I haven't taken ayahuasca, but I think, that's native to South America. The psilocybin grow pretty much on my front doorstep. So that's native to me. The only differences I can see is Ayahuasca seems to be a very earth-based. You get a lot of animal spirits and stuff. Mushrooms seem to me more a kind of weird extraterrestrial kind of vibe, which Terence McKenna attests to as well. And of course, his stoned ape theory of mushrooms having somehow traveled through space and seeded themselves on this planet seems entirely feasible to me. So when we look at effects, let's go into the effects. Effects include visions, personal insights, intellectual ideations, and profound spiritual and mystical experiences. Experience of other realities, or I would say dimensions, ultimate truths, and encounters with the divine. Interestingly, a new syncretic religion called the Church of Santo Daime has hymns which are absolutely similar to those of Vedic and Zoroastrian hymns. Vedic is the old Indian stuff. Zoroastrianism was an old Middle Eastern religion that had a total influence on everything that followed it. You know, each spiritual, I don't know if I'm going to be able to express this well, because by the time we get into Grimoires, it's the same spiritual technology. It's just dressed in Persian. Thank you, Baz. It's dressed in the language and modalities of the time. So where Grimoires insist on Christian symbolism, prayers and all that, you know, I'm sure it's the same entities we're dealing with. So this is a bit of a confusing point for me. And it's another, yeah, exactly. Mushroom spores can stay alive in outer space. I do believe that. But what one of my central theses is that these spiritual entities may be pre-existing, but the fact that the ones in the grimoire will only answer, like Kia Solomon and all these kind of Christian grimoires, why do they only respond to Christian prayers and the consecrations of holy water and all that stuff? Is it not more likely that we have empowered these thought forms? We've dressed them. I mean, even I've read that because these spirits don't have any physical bodies or any physicality at all, they're pure spirit or pure mind or pure intelligence, we dress them in our to give them a physical reality. You know, people do speak about physical manifestations of spirits, which I have poo-pooed for a long time. But then when you've got people like, hey, Disalbian, yeah, exactly. Grimoires were written by Christians, but they're tapping into a much earlier tradition of like Greek and Egyptian magic, and before that, Stone Age shamanism, and that is kind of the point of this live stream. So yeah, we've got the Vedic and Zoroastrian traditions, Hindu Soma, and Iranian Hauma. Another one called Paganum Harmala. Harmal is like a Eastern entheogen. This guy, Benny Shannon, was doing field work and he discovered a large field of this Harmal stuff right close to the caves in Qumran, where the Dead Sea, not the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they were buried at the Dead Sea. Is it the Dead Sea Scrolls? Anyway, that was, the Qumran find with all the Gnostic literature and stuff. Absolutely, there are beautiful Greek grimoires, the magical papyri and all that. So I'm thinking if these are the spirits that, they must be the same spirits, unless they are absolutely thought forms built by, like, as we would a thought form or an egregore, by deliberately creating entities, which then, I know PG aren't grimoires. Grimoires are specifically Middle Ages and later Christian works. I'm saying there is a thread running through them, which is contacting spirits through ritual, through prayer, through incense, through correspondences. So, stick with me and please do not try and correct me. especially when you've never been in my chat before. Disalbion. No offense. So yeah, this guy Benny Shannon found a huge crop of this harmaline, or whatever you call it, in front of the tombs at Qumran, or the caves at Qumran. So he also he focuses on Moses. If Moses was actually a physical, a human character in the first place, I sometimes doubt that. A lot of people say, okay, Solomon wasn't a historical character. There was never a temple. Jesus wasn't a historical character. The Romans made him up. Moses might not have been a historical character, but it doesn't invalidate the mystical, spiritual, and unfortunately religious writings that have come through to us. Because I do feel like the esoteric forms of all the major religions are cool, and I listen to a really good glitch bottle, which is one of my favorites, by a guy called N. Watid. I find it difficult to write my own writing. N. Watid Azal, and he's like a modern Sufi, and he founded a mystical Sufi order, and their sacrament is Ayahuasca, because he, like me, had a moment of enlightenment when he first took, I think it was psilocybin he first took, and the mystical world is open to you. So other prophets saw the divine through a speculum. I'm not even sure what a speculum was. That doesn't shine. This is in the Babylonian Talmud. Moses saw God through a speculum that shines and spoke to him face to face, which makes me think that Moses took entheogens, which I've got a book over there called The Moses Legacy, which suggests that, the burning bush, also Benny Shannon does as well. Seeing a burning bush, which is not touched by fire, is a very typical, I hesitate to even call them hallucinations, but, let's call them hallucinations, because there's something that is not there in the physical reality, that's there in your mind's eye. So was Moses tripping out of his face? And I totally think he was. Episodes of Moses's life, typical of patterns of psychedelic experience. His first encounter with God in Sinai desert. And the angel of the Lord appeared in fire out of a bush. And the bush wasn't true hallucinations, exactly. And the bush was not consumed. Some people say the bush itself was a hallucinogenic plant. And think of all the hallucinogenic or plants like the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're all plants that I think humans have been ingesting since the Stone Age. Acacia, yeah, absolutely. The Bible gives strict instructions on how to build the Ark of the Covenant, and also that tent that they all, like the Holy of Holies and all that. And the one wood that they specify is acacia. So absolutely, the history of religion to me is the history of psychedelics. Another one is when Moses and Aaron go in and they have that kind of flame war with the Egyptian magicians or priests, and their staffs turn into serpents. Serpents are an absolute, if you take enough DMT-like substances, you will see a serpent. On one of my big trips, I saw a huge female snake, which kind of lambasted me for picking a stupid, at the time it was fashionable, as so many things in magic are, fashion. The spirit thing has become a bit of a fashion with the equating and all them, and being mates with spirits and all that. I picked a rather pretentious Latin moniker like Fratus Sanctus Coluber or something, which meant holy snake. And when I encountered this snake in a trip, she was like, "How dare you pick such a fucking stupid moniker, you know. You haven't earned it. So the very fact that you had a vision would indicate to me that there might have been DMT-ish substances involved. This is an interesting thing. These 10 commandments, the covenant made with God in Israel. And I also had a covenant idea. I don't know, it just seemed very feminine to me, Robin. When you're in that, things don't make sense, but you understand them. All the people saw the thunderings and lightnings, etc. They saw the God of Israel. And I've written this description is typical of, and weirdly, I've picked a little arrow symbol because I couldn't be bothered writing psilocybin DMT. I've picked the arrow symbol for mushrooms, DMT, acacia, whatever it is. I said it's so typical of that experience, intense light, fear of death. When you come on to a really large dose of psychedelics, you feel like you may die. And that's the cause of a lot of bad trips, because they worry, and that starts to catapult them into a negative experience. So light, fear of death at onset, synesthesia, which is something I've talked about before, where you feel like you can hear colors, you can see music, your senses are kind of rewired. I think it's really, I feel like it's plugging you into some kind of higher dimensionality. How do we understand fifth dimensional beings in our little third dimensional world down here? And Moses talks about actually having kind of conversations with God. And that's another extremely, I've never experienced it in any other way, but you take the mushrooms almost takes on a kind of voice, a teaching voice, and it's talking you through. And I end up waving my arms and asking questions and demanding answers, and it gives you answers, but it's kind of playful, and it kind of talks in riddles to a certain extent. And, the Merkaba mystics and all that early mysticism, absolutely, they describe the same thing. They're kind of leaving their bodies, which you do if you take enough psilocybin. You're journeying to the farthest reaches. Some trips are hellish, some trips are heavenly, etc., etc. Ezekiel's vision, for instance, Enoch as well. All these guys, John of Patmos from Revelations, all very, very trippy. Shittenwood, funnily enough, is used in the construction of the tabernacle and the art. And shittenwood is acacia. I wouldn't like to be shitting wood, if you know what I mean. Osiris's coffin was also made of acacia. And the idea of like a mythic death and rebirth is absolutely, again, central to the psilocybin experience for me. You totally feel like you've died and you've been reborn in a better, more complete form. Also, acacia is sacred to Freemasonry, and the tree of knowledge in Eden also involves a serpent. The Ketoret HaSamin, the incense of drugs, that's literally what it's called, whose ingredients were lost at the destruction of the temple, contained, if you ask me, cannabis, all kinds of trippy stuff. So excuse me if I'm going to get a little bit lost in my notes, because some pages are written proper side up, some right. So I won't go too much into Aaron Leach's book, actually. But for me, the main points are magic comes from tribal shamanism with its emphasis on vocation. You don't choose to become a tribal shaman. It's kind of forced on you through some kind of weird experience you have. And it also reminds me of UFO abduction. You don't choose to be abducted. Many people are, and the report being experimented on. this is very similar, an ancient shamanic trope that when you're abducted by these underworld or non-human entities, you're cut up, you're disassembled, and you're reformed, often with an extra part or an extra ability. You are dragged into the abyss, but when you come back, you've got the gift of healing or second sight or dream work or some extra ability. So yeah, the shaman has taken another dimension where he's assembled and recombined. And this also echoes the idea that I am working through with the Golden Dawn, where you work with each element in turn, you incorporate it, so you're kind of disassembling your old self. And interestingly, Aaron Leach, very unexpectedly, because I thought Aaron Leach was one of the most traditional of the, kind of grimoire purists, but not so. In the very first few pages, he mentions the Levy-Wilson 8-circuit brain model, which is, for me, just absolute genius. You can fit every magical phenomena, philosophical idea into the idea that we have 4 old primate or mammalian circuits, which are, the first one is oral biological. It's just basically, it's an oral fixation of being fed. So you go towards nurturing things, you retreat from threatening things. The second circuit is the anal territorial. I believe I've got them written down somewhere, which is you start to learn your place in the packing order of the family or the tribe. So where is it? The third is a very interesting one. No, sorry. Yeah, here we go. So we've got the first one, oral biosurvival. That's basically you cling to your mother, you suck from her breast, you move towards safe things, you move away from threatening things. The second is the anal territorial, which is you start to learn your place in the pecking order, be that your family or your tribe. The third one, fascinating, the semantic time-binding circuit, where you start to learn how to manipulate symbols and language and concepts. And the time-binding thing, fascinating, comes from Alfred Korzybski, Science and Sanity, is it? William Burroughs was very into this idea as well. Is time-binding is how humans have evolved so fast. It's because we have the accumulated knowledge of all the generations that have gone past in yes, Leach's Golden Dawn. Yep, absolutely is. I'm going to turn that music up a little bit, actually. It's quite good. So, yeah, we stand on the shoulder of giants. We know as much as we do because Aristotle and Plato and all them, it's an accumulation of technology. It's an accumulation of wisdom. Before language, humans were just animals. That is what makes humans humans, isn't it? It's our facility for language. The fourth circuit that everybody has is the socio-sexual circuit, which basically is your sexual role. And very important idea in this system is that your accidental imprints, your first orgasm experience. Yeah, that's really good, Disalbian. Yeah, I like that. I actually, is that in Prometheus Rising? That Scotty's first circuit, because he's, Bones is second because he's like an engineer. Third is Spock. Yeah, I like that one. So what's basically saying is if you're treated horribly as a baby, you will imprint the ideas of fear, nothing's safe, and you're going to end up with some mental health problems in the future. If you get a misimprint on the second anal territorial, you're going to feel weak. You're going to feel like you have no control. The third one, I'm not sure what a bad imprint on that, but a good imprint would be that, I understand language, I understand culture, and I'm going to contribute and try and push culture and language further on. I think for imprinting, the fourth socio-sexual circuit is probably so apparent in today's society, because if you are abused as a child, or there's so many things that can go wrong with a circuit. Like Robert Anton Wilson talks about a goose who's somehow sexually imprinted on a Jeep, or maybe it wasn't a goose. No, it was a goose and a ping pong ball, and some four-legged animal had imprinted on a. But you can change. The whole point of magic, the whole point of meditation, and I would say psilocybin, DMT, whatever you have, is you can go back and you can reprogram these circuits. The fifth circuit is your neurosomatic. So that's linking your mind with your body. It's not present in everyone, but people who smoke dope, Robert Anton would suggest, Wilson, or meditation and all that, that opens this fifth circuit. The sixth circuit is your meta-programming circuit, which allows you to go over all the previously hardwired imprints and go back and I think that's what ritual magic does. It identifies your weak spots or your negative imprints, and you go back and you try and imprint better, healthier imprints. The morphogenetic and the non-local are a bit nebulous for me at the moment, although I do think that they have been momentarily open for me. I wouldn't really know how to describe them, and I haven't seen very many, because nobody's really inhabiting these circuits, the more advanced circuits so far. So what I've been thinking about spirits is, there seems to be a lot of kind of blind acceptance. Oh yeah, I'm working with Lucifer and Satan and Belial. And are they trying to say that these entities, these ancient, super powerful, much more than human entities, are like, lapdogs? Or I don't know. I haven't really understood that. I've joined a few Facebook groups, so I have been a lot more open to the idea of working with spirits, because why limit myself by saying, okay, magic is only psychological? And like I say, I have done 2 invocations lately. One was totally ineffective because I was hungover to shit, and I had a pounding sore head. I tried to contact Haggith or Agate from the Arbitel of Magic. The second one, me and Soror Star done on Sunday, it was a lot more successful, and I do believe I kind of made contact with what you could describe as Ok, the solar spirit, but it's all so very, you're not going to get a physical man, certainly not from the Olympic spirits. They don't do that. But I felt a presence. I got a visual of, the first thing I saw was like, the anonymous mask. That kind of always reminds me of a king like Charles II. I think it's probably supposed to be Guy Fawkes. But I got that picture. Then I got a picture of the emperor in the Thoth or Thoth tarot deck orange, a kingly figure. And I asked for his secret name. The secret name didn't really make any sense, and it will have to remain secret because that's what magic's about. I also asked for a familiar spirit. I was given the name of this familiar spirit. Again, it didn't really check intuitively with solar stuff. And I was given a number as well. So who knows? So here's something I wrote on Saturday, the 2nd of May. On reflection, it seems that the reignition of my interest, indeed obsession with classical magic and evocation, coincides with me starting the practicus grade in my Golden Dawn manual. The grade is attributed to Mercury, which is associated with communication, language, that would be totally like your semantic time-binding thing, and gods like Hermes and Thoth. In the Solomonic literature I've been reading, they pretty much say if in doubt, hey, Glandel, man, if in doubt, do it in the hour and day of Mercury. Is that all I wrote there? See, my notes are so all over the... I promise, one of these days, I'm going to do a live stream that actually makes sense. See, that's a tarot reading I did. I was trying to figure out how to progress in magic because I do really get stuck. So it's, oh yeah, that's the tarot reading. Okay, skip that. I've got such bizarre note making. Okay, so main point so far. Magic comes from tribal shamanism with its emphasis on vocation through some peculiarity of character. Is that what we'd now call mental illness? Because honestly, some of these people I encounter in the Facebook groups are, I mean, I've had to unfriend a few people who are clearly totally mentally ill, you know. Not that there's anything wrong with being mentally ill, but when you're having delusions and other people are kind of encouraging that delusion, and I'm not talking about sensible people like Stephen Skinner, Dr. Stephen Skinner, or BJ Swain, or a lot of the really cool people I've met that say, yeah, you can totally work with spirits. But these guys are like issuing commands from Lucifer, you know, all the conspiracy theory stuff. It just gets crazy. Occultists should not be put off by the religious tone of the grimoires. Beneath the veneer of officially sanctioned prayers is a thoroughly pagan, pantheistic, animistic system where everything has a spirit and a level of intelligence. So this is like Agrippa, who I've been reading a lot lately as well. You know, everything, even rocks, plants, they all, the chain of being was a big concept in the Renaissance. But I think it shouldn't be too hard for someone who is kind of, you know, I'm certainly not a Christian bit for it, or a talent for it, I should say. But then in Crowley's day, I think there was a big effort to understand magic and get away from the superstition. And, you know, some of these grimoires do actually suggest that you need the blood of a bat and the third feather from the wing of a white pigeon, you know, and it does seem superstitious and it does seem silly. But if you think about it in terms of everything has energy signatures, then perhaps these things do make a bit more sense. My first impulse when I decided to start doing more Solomonic traditional magic was, right, I'll get a hazel wand from the internet, I'll order a robe. I just want to find a baseline where I can start to work. The spirits will come, but I don't want to go through all this religious bullshit. But what I'm finding now is that, and this is Aaron Leach that suggests this, that if you look upon it as like a magical quest, where you're not just ordering a hazel wand from the internet, but you're actually having to go out into nature to locate a hazel tree, which I've actually done. It's just on the railway line along there. It should be, you know, you should take it when before it's, there's a lot of emphasis on virginal things. And, you know, maybe that's where this weird conspiratorial idea of sacrificing virgins and louche and adrenochrome and all that comes from. You know, it's easy to read this stuff and think, oh my God, they're talking about sacrificing virgins. And when you get Crowley talking about, you know, sacrificing a perfect male child, what do you expect, really? But it's absolutely not about that. So yeah, I think if I hadn't read Secrets of the Magical Grimoires, I would have just kept the Key of Solomon as a kind of curiosity. It's a beautiful book, but I couldn't see any way to work it because it's not like modern books on magic, which says, okay, first do this and kind of get a feel for it and then do that. The chapters are all spread about the place. It's not an easy system to work. But Leach convinced me to keep reading by his inclusion very early in the book of the Leary Wilson 8-circuit model. He shouts out Prometheus Rising as a way of understanding human psychology and behavior, but not in a way that discounts the idea that there are living spirits in the world. In fact, the world is full of living spirits. Oh, I just got a new subscriber, Manuel Alejandro Caparia. Thank you very much if you're watching now. So we've just gone through the higher spirits. So the idea is that the universe and planet Earth are filled with invisible entities and intelligences. My own experiences with psilocybin should have proved to me that entities are not simply parts of my psychology, because things that pop up all the time that are not part of my psychology, you know? Like I've said before, when I used to channel, the first ever weird experiences I had were a vision that told me that I was in touch with Pleiadians and they wanted me to save the Earth and all that kind of stuff. That would have not occurred to me, you know, so something outside was reaching in. And before I forget, I should probably mention, when I was doing my Zealot rituals, I had a very intense vision one time of, I was doing like fire breath and deliberately, when you're over breathing, you're flooding your brain with oxygen. And 1 minute I was in my own room here. The next minute I was in a completely different landscape. It was like a Scottish landscape, but there were no human habitations about. There was a cave entrance. So I walked inside this very dark, dingy cave, and there was an old, scrawny looking wizard there. His beard was all grey and matted. He had on like a white sort of nightshirt. His feet were all dirty. He was all grubby. There was this weird animal running about, which kind of behaved like a pet dog. But I actually kind of worked out that it was a griffin. You know, they're supposed to have lion heads and eagle's wings, but this thing didn't have any wings. It was just like a bald kind of dinosaur dog. So before I went into the cave, I asked, for some reason, what is my name? And it came out as Shabbatai. Make of that what you will. There was a religious leader in, anybody that's interested in conspiracy theory and Satanism and all that, like the Frankists will have heard of Shabbatai Zvi. But also Shabbatai, I think it means the moon or something in the Golden Dawn. I can't remember offhand. So I went into the cave and this wizard was like shivering. It was all dank, but there was a little tiny pile of sticks on this cave ground. And I found a little, this is all happening in like a dream, but I was absolutely awake and there was no drugs involved at all, which is very strange. And I had this little white tank, like you sometimes see feathers just floating down. So I had this feather and there's this tiny little pile of kindling on the cave floor. And I had the idea that I should drop the feather onto this kindling. And as soon as I did, a massive fire roared, like the flames went literally shot up to the roof. And the once puny Arbitel became this wizard with his arms in the shape of like a tau, like a crucified kind of position. And he took on the aspect of Christopher Lee from the Lord of the Rings films. And he started to levitate and he was like, oh, and it became extremely powerful. And and I asked his name and it was Arbitel of all names. And at this point, I'd never really looked into the old grimoire magical stuff. I had no idea. I'd never heard of Arbitel. So I put it on the THOTH Thoth Facebook page. And this guy said, well, that's actually an old grimoire. So I've been talking to people in groups about, how'd you get started on all this spirit stuff? And I'm not quite sure. And somebody said, well, I only work with, I think it was Clayton Masterton. He said, I only work with entities that kind of present themselves to me in dreams or visions, sometimes, I don't know if I want to be a full-on goetic sorcerer conjuring these kings of hell and all that. I don't think that's really me. But when he said it, I thought, well, I haven't really had any dreams of entities. That's not really how it works for me. And then I remembered that. And funnily enough, it has been the Arbitel Olympic spirits that I have been attempting to work with, and believe I may have had some recent success. So guys, that's me almost on my hour already. I've got a talk coming up with a guy called Anon Message, and we're going to be talking about occultism and music. So I think he is waiting. So I can't believe that hour went so quickly. It just means I'll have much more material next time. I'm going to keep conjuring the Arbitel from the Arbitel. I've now learned, before I forget, I've got a few people who have been very nice on Facebook. You know, Facebook really isn't so bad. A lot of trolls, but there's some really nice people who want to advise and help. So the first person I want to shout out is Aqueous Knox, who's got an excellent YouTube channel. It's a girl. She's interviewed I think Rufus Opus and a couple of people. She's been really nice, so give her a sub or check in. So it's AEQUUSNOX. Another one is my dear friend Georgios Gostas. Forgive me if I get the name wrong. He's got a fantastic blog called Sephirus Occult at .blogspot. He's done a lot of work on the Arbitel. Well worth a read. Another person, BJ Swain, really nice guy, out of his way to advise newbies. Although I'm not a newbie in magic, I'm certainly a newbie to the idea of spirits and stuff. He's very helpful. Clayton Masterton, who I had the exchange with, very nice guy, and a lady called Ariana Aurora Dab, very nice. Again, invited me. You get invited. It's nice. If you've given up on Facebook, make up a silly name and join Facebook and talk to the people again. And last but not least, a guy called Will Moore, who makes hilarious memes on various occult topics. And it's just funny, and he's made me laugh quite a lot lately. So shout out to him. So I'll just say a quick hello to everyone in the live chat. If anybody wants to say a quick hello or anything that they want read out, now's the time to do it. So, hi Lisa F. Hi Sar Lux. Yeah, I think that is the standard opinion, that my opinion, is that something in our own psychology kind of resonates at the same frequency, if you'll forgive the New Age language, as these beings who aren't really beings, but we've perhaps created them in our image. You know, I said on the, of course, say hi to Sam and Keats Ross and all the guys. I said on Pragmagic that I didn't think gods made humans. I think humans made gods. I still believe that, but I think, my views are always open to modification when new information comes in, If people as intelligent as Stephen Skinner and Al Cummins, Dr. Al Cummins and all them, absolutely say, yes, you can make contact with independently, objectively real spirits. Well, who am I to doubt it? So, hi, Robin. Hi, Glendale. Nice one. Philip Blair. Baz. Lisa. Okay, so I think that's it. I'll move the mic over here, play out with a bit of music, and that'll be my hour up. If I didn't have to speak to a non-massage, I would have probably hung about for a while. But I think these Tuesday live streams seem to be working quite well. I need to organise my notes a lot better still.